Welcome everybody, this is John Burra and welcome to the Mammoth Podcast. In this podcast I talk about what's going on at my company, Mammoth Interactive. I talk about what's going on in the tech world, and most importantly I give you some tips on how to program and how to use technology in cool ways. So welcome to the Mammoth Podcast. Alright, so this week, as usual, was a very busy week at Mammoth Interactive. Essentially what we released this week was the first things we'll talk about the education, tutorials that we've released, and then we'll talk some about the software that was released this week. So the first thing that we released was Hour Jquery. Now, if you don't know what this is, it's a programming language similar to JavaScript, so that means it's a web programming language. And it's actually, what it's used for is to take some parts of JavaScript and make it a lot easier to program. And jQuery is actually a pretty cool language. It can be a little bit difficult to look at just because there's a lot of symbols in there. And whenever you see a symbol in programming language, everyone assumes it's always going to be really hard, but jQuery isn't that hard, and I teach people how to do some cool stuff with it in only an hour, and you can see the link below. The next thing is I also released Hour Xcode, which is the same kind of idea as jQuery, except you get to learn how to make a simple app in Xcode in 1 hour. And what this is that in Xcode is the flagship software that you need to make Apple applications. So if you're on a Mac, pretty much everything that you see on there was made in Xcode. And for the most part, any iPhone app that you've seen has made in Xcode. If not, sometimes what the engines do is they actually make some kind of visual representation of what the app should look like, and then they actually render it in Xcode code, which is like Objective-C, and they render that to the file, and then it goes all the way to the App Store. So with Apple, of course, they want you to use their software because everything's vertically integrated. And of course, I always have this deal where if you want, you can get, for $1.99, you can get all my courses, which is 24 at this point. And that comes out to about $8.50 a course, and you get all the ones I produced in 2013. So you can go ahead and check that out. The link is below. All right, so let's talk a little bit about games, because we released a game, and this game is called Circle Zombie Survival. And the best way to describe this game is to, if you like I Made a Game with Zombies in It by Ska Studios, and if you like Geometry Wars, they're essentially those two games mixed together. It's somewhat of a more artistic game in terms of the graphics, but the gameplay is very much like I Made a Game with Zombies in It. So if you like that, those two games, then I highly recommend checking this out. It's available for the Chrome Web Store as we speak, and it will be made for other platforms, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But if you don't know I Made a Game with Zombies in It, it was an indie success. It made something like $300,000 on Xbox Live Indie Games, and for the most part, it's actually a pretty fun and simple game, and I always like simple. Simple is fantastic. So I make most of my 2D games in Construct 2, and I make most of my 3D games in Unity 3D. And the reason is that they're very indie friendly. You can get a lot of stuff done for much less work than, let's say, using a AAA engine where you have a team of 100 people to work with to make the game. So with Construct 2, everything is deployed to HTML5, so that's HTML and JavaScript for the most part. And so since they're made in Construct 2, I can deploy it to the web store and a whole bunch of other stores, and they will be coming out, all right? It will probably come out for the Ouya at some point, but as of now, there's no exporter to the Ouya. I definitely have one. I ordered it, and it's actually a pretty good console. I do like the Ouya quite a bit. And Circle Zombie Survival will come out for it. Except there is no exporter. So the one thing I do with Construct 2 is I make the game once and I deploy it to all these other areas. Now, what's actually really cool is that Construct 2 has a Wii U exporter that is in the works apparently. So I'm very excited to hear about that. I don't know how expensive it's going to be to actually release something for the Wii U. Last time I checked, the fees were actually quite a bit expensive. And of course, I'm hearing this secondhand because a lot of this stuff is tied up between non-disclosure acts, etc. But usually and typically, if you want to make a console game, there's actually quite a huge financial barrier to it. So, for example, sometimes the certification can cost, something like a new car, not a new house. So you're thinking, let's say, like $50,000, and I'm just throwing that out there. I actually don't even know, and again, the people who do know are behind non-disclosure acts. So the exact number isn't exactly known, but it does cost a lot of money. So the cool thing is that Xbox One recently announced that they're going to allow indies to self-publish. Now, this is great because I like self-publishing. I also like going through a publisher too, because remember, Nickelodeon picked up one of our games last year, and I do like going through both, but being able to self-publish is really important, especially today. Now, the one thing is that in 2010, I made a game for Xbox Live Indie Games, which is for the Xbox 360. Now, on the Xbox 360, there's 3 tiers. There's the Xbox games, there's the Xbox Live Arcade games, and then there's the Xbox Live Indie games. I hope that Xbox One doesn't make an Xbox Live Indie games for the Xbox One. I hope it's something much better. Xbox Live Indie Games wasn't bad, it just wasn't that great. And the reason is that you didn't have access to achievements, you couldn't do in-app purchases, you couldn't do a whole bunch of stuff you could do in Xbox Live Arcade. And if you notice, if you release for Apple for instance, well, you can go ahead and you can use anything that you want, which is actually the way it should be. So, for example, if Angry Birds has a functionality, you can go and add in that same functionality, whether it's achievements, in-app purchases. You can use whatever you want. And I really hope that Xbox One does that. And again, with Construct 2, I can export this to Xbox One, PS4, Wii U, Ouya, whatever. I like playing console games personally the best, and I would like to see my games on all of them. All right, so we have the Wii U exporter. It should come out for the Windows Store and possibly the Mac App Store as well. Again, there is a little bit of an issue of exporting it and making sure it works. Now, I should probably point out at this point about the design, because usually when game companies release something for a Mac, they have to tone it down a bit. And in Circle Zombie Survival, I use something, I use an artistic mechanic called particles. And if you don't know what particles are, they're essentially 2D sprites with movement. So, for example, an explosion, you might have a whole bunch of sparks going every which way. Now, I put in a lot of particles with this, and that's actually kind of cool. But the thing is that particles are really, really extensive when it comes to resources. So we'll see how that works on the Ouya. I did test the game on the Mac. Then again, uploading it to the Mac App Store is a little bit more complicated than just making a .app file. But I did test it, and I did have to tone it down. As far as I can tell on my computer, the testing seems to work well in the Chrome Web Store, but I have a funny suspicion I'm going to have to tone it back. I was going to release it for the Windows Metro Store, or whatever they are calling it now, but the thing is there was a little bit of bug and the sound didn't play. And I should probably point out at this point that the soundtrack to Circle Zombie Survival is some fairly cool music that I'm very proud of. I'm always proud of the music in my games because I tend to, there's different ways of making game music, and I tend to make music like Mega Man. So if you like Mega Man, you're going to like my music. If you don't like the music in Mega Man, then you're probably not going to like the music in my games. And what's really cool is this Circle Zombies has an aesthetic style that you're used to if you've played a Mammoth Interactive game before. It has all the text circles, and it's kind of like my game Circa, except the resources on the Xbox One surprisingly weren't that much, because when you released to the Xbox One, you had to use a limited .NET framework, and it wasn't as powerful as it could have been. It wasn't in something like native code or something like that. But this here, the HTML5 games actually handle resources and resource management quite well, and I could actually get away with using a lot of particles. And so I might have to update that. I'll see what the data is from the crash reports. Sometimes on really old computers, if you use too many particles, it can crash. That definitely was the case with the Xbox game. All right. And so so there's a sound bug, and I think that pretty much wraps it up. Remember, all the stuff I talked about, all the links are in the bottom here, and you can go check it out. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And, of course, the website is mammothinteractive.com. Now, I'm going to give you a pro tip, because I always like to give a pro tip. And the pro tip for this one is if you're going to make a game, do all your screenshot editing at once. In fact, anytime you have editing to do with images, for example, game size, you want to do that all at once because it will save time in the end. Even if you have a super fast computer, pulling up Photoshop, selecting the file, changing the size and saving it, you want to do all that at once before you go ahead and actually release to the store of your choice. All right. Well, that concludes the podcast. I hope you come back next week. I'll see you guys next time.